We can start now. We can start when you are ready. Yes.
So, are you going to give the introduction, or should I?
Yes, give us an introduction. You mean me? Yeah, I told them about like who you are and what kind of your role in this project in Chinese before, so you can just start.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, hi everyone. Greetings from Amsterdam, where I'm at, and actually, it's it's morning, but thanks. Sorry. So day just about broke, and I see actually that you are at the end of it. So I'm really sorry not to be in one at this moment to join for this really amazing, what sounds to be like a really amazing week of thinking about plants and the politics around them and amongst themselves. I guess what I would like to do today is tell you a story about how this concept of phytocracy came about, and sort of how I also tackled through several years of trying to understand plants, how I tried to tackle the various ways that we can view them that happen at the same time, and also how to understand their vegetal difference. But anyway, I will start, like I said, with a story and with a bit of to transport you to the summertime, to Europe, specifically to Lithuania, to Nida, where I did a 3-month residency. Now I'll start sharing the screen. Right. So I hope you can still hear me. I'll try to talk slow, because sometimes these internet connections make everything unclear. If you cannot hear me, please interrupt and I'll say it again. So a couple of years ago, I was invited for 3 months to a residency in the Curonian Spit. And the Curonian Spit is a very specific type of geological formation. You can see it sort of on the map. So it's in Lithuania. And the spit itself is actually a dune that appears from the Baltic Sea. And it's inherently unstable. So actually it's about 5,000 years old only. And during this time, it's constantly being moved back and forth. Did I say 5,000? No, I meant 50,000. Sorry for this, not 5,000. But anyway, so it's a very transient and unstable geological phenomenon. But somehow it's also been very, very important for people, because they use this spit as a way to move things around, because it's quite flat. It's easy to walk on the beach, even with horses. So it always had a bit of a strategic and defense value for the people that lived here, the inhabitants. And this is where the Nida art colony is as well. So for 3 months, I was able to live here and develop sort of a project. So I will now read you a text that I wrote during the residency. It's quite short, and these are the pictures actually from NIDA. Late May, about a month into my 3-month residency at NIDA Art Colony, a thought from my incessant internal monologue stopped me dead in my tracks. As most afternoons, if the swarms of mosquitoes permitted, I had been wandering along the sandy paths crisscrossing the dunes. Now, these dunes weren't exactly the Aeolian formations I fantasized about when invited to the thin strip of unsettled land caught between the Baltic Sea and the Curonian Lagoon. Instead, I was met by an unbearably picturesque mossy pine grove, straight out of a Disney fairy tale. Planted in the 19th and 20th centuries as a part of a bioengineering attempt to stabilize the dunes and protect the settlements from the effects of erosion, the pine forests are man-made, and they're protected by UNESCO as a natural cultural heritage site. So the tension between the absent, truly natural wilderness and its aesthetically pleasing but monotonous cultural double was almost unavoidable. It was inscribed in the symposium catalogs I glanced through, in the way the national park employees described the landscape, in the ecosystems themselves. So I'm referring to this tension that these incredibly beautiful sites with pine trees and this nature that is on the Curonian Spit is in fact somehow man-made. It's been engineered, and they use these trees to actually stabilize what would naturally be always moving a piece of land. So, making my way through the blueberry-bedded forest, I tuned in to the hum of my cranium. Look at this beauty, this breathtaking pine spectacle. I despise the fact you are irresistible to me. I am disappointed that in spite of everything I know about your precarious displacement, about the harsh deforestation perpetuated by the early capitalist machine searching for primitive accumulation, you that were brought here to remedy a human miscalculation, you that are somehow complicit, I deeply disagree, but your sight and scent overwhelm me with sweet affect. I will not succumb to the naivety of romanticizing you with nature. I dismiss the bourgeois taste that finds this tame wilderness pleasing. I see through you. So obviously I was thinking about how, especially the Lithuanians, or actually you can't help but come to the Curonian Spit and admire how beautiful it is. But at the same time, this is actually man-made type of natural environment. So there is sort of an inherent question of values and conflict. Okay, but I return back to my story. In parallel, another line of thought when processing my privilege as an artist in residence, enjoying the otherwise unattainable spoils of the middle class was developing, rhythmically punctuating the form. The topics of urgency have faded. Instead, I contemplate deep time and the post-romantic, post-modernist Eden. questions of nature cultures, and conceptions of myth places. We are encouraged to be critical, but it's a controlled criticality, isn't it? Aimed at no one in particular, subdued and pacified by the sunset sauna of the book. What am I actually here for? Is there a space for the artist vegetarian, the fragmented piece of bodies held together more by semantics and digital footprints than physical forces? Nothing queer is allowed to exist here. Just like paths and gazes, topics and discourses are imposed by centuries of constructions, tied to the authenticity of the fabricated place. Connecting to any of the local green cube issues, critically or not, maintains their status of a force to be reckoned with, confirming their relevance to contemporary existence. It legitimizes this museum nature while marginalizing our error-prone, self-medicating, technology-dependent, painfully heteronomous, sadomasochistic being that has to deal with real nature cultures in the real world. I jolted, eyes wide with the aha moments, the irreconcilable parallel rumination of my hyperactivated mind spat out the strange realization. I am the pine tree. For 4 years, as a former science researcher working with plants in an artistic context, I was fully convinced by the leading philosophers on the topic that human empathy with plants was not possible, at least not in its authentic, non-anthropomorphic sense. But at that moment, I felt what could only be described as authentic empathy. I wasn't pretending to be the pine tree, imagining what it was like to be slow, photosynthetic, with roots growing into my offspring, connected in some orgasmic community of vegetal oneness. What I felt was the violence of my own judgments on their bark skin, the dismissal of their actual physical presence because of the historical succession over which they had no control. Because pine trees grow quickly and have deep, wide-reaching roots, they're useful for stabilizing soil. So wasn't I the victim and perpetrator in one, epitomizing the confusing affect of our increasingly radicalized society? Wasn't this the other end of the dis-ease that had been haunting me since my arrival? Being out of place, but having to do? Embarrassed but relieved over my little epiphany, I kept walking. So the story is basically about how I was in this very beautiful place with the romantic nature surrounding me. And I was at the same time sort of in conflict with the fact that I was overwhelmed with what I perceived as beautiful, and at the same time that this presupposition of beauty is somehow oppressive. It's oppressive to nature, and in societies in parallel, it's oppressive to us as well, right? Because it's sort of, and I'm not talking just about beauty, it also can be health, it can be all sorts of other standards that are sort of accepted and imposed. And in that moment, with the realization that I am the pine tree, I felt a different type of connection with plants, one that I haven't felt yet. Somehow I saw that much of what we are, how we are understanding and dismissing them it's not specific to plants. It's just a way that we in our particular cultures construct otherness and construct these relations. So when we are thinking about plants, it's also an exercise about thinking of others. There is not such a significant difference for me between one and the other, between xenophobic tendencies of humans and this kind of ignorance of plants, but also the affection and a sort of connection. So I feel like plants are a really interesting case study because they're challenging in how we relate to them. And at the same time, they allow us to really investigate those relations in a different way that we would otherwise if instead of plants we were trying to relate to other humans or maybe even animals. So yeah, I would like to also explain a bit more about how I got to this place where I got interested in plants to start with. So originally I'm trained as a biologist, as a scientist. And for the whole duration of my studies, I was also really plant blind. And this image you see is supposed to illustrate to everyone that how plant blind works. So we see the rabbit in the photo, but usually ignore the grass, the daffodils, the dandelions. Not the daffodils, the dandelions. And so if this is a demonstration of how we are attracted to small furry animals, it's also a demonstration of how our attention has been culturally defined. The fact that we are ignorant of plants is not only a biological fact or a biological predisposition, it's a heavily cultural one. So in this Western cosmology, in the Western philosophical tradition, plants have always been regarded as sort of at the border between inanimate and living, right? So you have minerals and then plants and then animals and then humans and then you have gods. Somehow that's the sort of traditional hierarchy of being that whether we accept it or not is still very much present as the basis of how we relate to everything. So if you automatically, if you're born into a world that sort of sees plants as without agency and passive, not only really slow, but also not interested, simple. And if you value actually autonomy and individuality and a sort of inner world, right, rationality, then naturally you won't think much of plants. On the other hand, we know that plants, which is like a very wide group of very different organisms, are fundamental to basically all of life on Earth. And personally, this sort of bothered me and intrigued me. How, with all this knowledge, am I still so ignorant of plants? I mean, all this knowledge, I mean, from the biological perspective, I studied science. I rationally knew how important plants were. And yet, I had no way of relating to them. And this sort of began my interest in the vegetal. And quite systematically, I chose to work on a series of art research projects that would explore the relation between humans and plants in an experiential level, that would sort of try to materially make or perform these weird encounters that would force us in one way or another to rethink plant being, right? So this opus, Confronting Vegetal Otherness, was all about these novel encounters. And I sort of set some rules for the opus at the start. So the first one was that I realized that if we're to investigate these relationships, we must realize that depending on the levels at which we are examining the relationships at, they will appear differently. So at the level of cells, plants and humans actually appear quite similar. Sure, the structure of the cells is different, but we can sort of see some common attitudes and common properties when we, for example, grow human cells in tissue culture or an algae in a bioreactor. On the level of the organism, the human animal and plants seem to differ the most. This is where all the difference, the values, the differences in values and approaches that I mentioned earlier become really prominent, because we base this in the organism as a manifestation of the individual is so important in our culture these days, at least in the West. But plants don't really seem to manifest themselves like that, because, well, not all, right? We see trees that have a very prominent appearance that can span hundreds of years as this individual, but it's a very different situation if we look at grass, because plants have a decentralized structure where every part is practically replaceable. And then they add also vegetative reproduction, where you can take a leaf, put it in water, and voila, you have a new plant. So the whole thing of confining a plant's existence in its individual, in this single organism, is impossible. And this is also where part of the difference in the conflict comes from. We cannot imagine what it's like not to be tied to this individual organism. And somehow we end up dismissing that. But then if we look at larger, deeper time, grander scales, on the level of societies, on the level of deep time co-evolution and co-adaptation between humans and plants, we can really see something that is much more, I don't know, egalitarian in terms of species interaction emerging. Because we cannot really say if it was wheat, if it was humans that through agriculture domesticated wheat, or if wheat domesticated humans, right? Because there was like a complete shift in the way that human societies form, and live through the rise of agriculture. And why not? And clearly, on a deeper time, plants seem to act very much similar to humans, right? So we can again see these two different principles of life coming together like that. And so to investigate these tensions and these relations on the three different scales, I also turned to semiotics, which is the study of signs. But I didn't really need to, I mean, the reason why I like semiotics, especially from the perspective of biosemiotics, is that through evolution, all of us who have and are still living on Earth have been not only in contact, in physical contact, but also in communication with others, right? So while we as humans are logocentric oftentimes, or mostly, so we focus on language as the defining characteristic of our cultures, our minds, our behavior. We can extend this notion of meaning that needs to be conveyed between organisms much wider, actually, to the beginning of life. When something of an organized system occurred in evolution, it was already not only material, but it was conveying meaning. It was putting material into relation, sorry, between one and the other. Like if you know a little bit of cell biology, you have the DNA, RNA, protein, like this paradigm of translation, of codification of information in the cell. And it is a process also of biosemiotics, where DNA codes for a certain sequence of proteins. So while it's material, it's also informational. And the context in which these molecules appear give the meaning to these molecules. And the reason I'm describing this is because if we think about what kind of relations we could or might or do have with plants, and if our cultural conceptions of plants get in the way, you know, if culturally we have disregarded plants for way too long, well, on a biosemiotic level, on the level of a co-evolution and growing with, they are as important now as they were ever. So the question for me was, how can this material exchange, this continuous chatter we have with plants as we see them, smell them, eat them, and constantly open channels of communication, how do we actually bring that forth so we pay more attention to that? Now, when I mentioned that my background is in science, it was actually my starting point also for this series, because I didn't want to have sort of presuppositions of what plant life is, could be get in the way. And I said, let's go down to the material exchange and see what happens. So in Scotopoesis, which was a 20-hour performance, I stood in front of a field of cress, which you can see here pictured as a close-up in the background. So it's this fast-growing seed from North Africa, actually, that you use that you eat on sandwiches and soups. It's quite spicy. So for 20 hours, with breaks in between, I stood there and I was illuminated with this projection light. And during this time, when I sort of tried to stand as still as possible, the plants were also perceiving my shadow and trying to, well, not react. They were reacting to it. And so the plant reaction is actually to try to escape the shadow and grow into the light. This is not just a consequence of not being able to photosynthesize. Light, like for us, is also sensorial quality. So plants have photoreceptors that tell them the intensity and presence of light and the presence of wavelengths. So in this case, it was something like the plant germinating under another tree. And they were trying to escape the shadow of the tree and grow into the light. And with this, after 20 hours, there was sort of an imprint on the crest that was left by the shadow. And this was proof that, yeah, plants actually sensed my presence. But of course, we will never know how I appeared in the, let's call it, mind of the plants. Like the plants will never really know how they appeared in our minds. So there's this intercognition going on, where clearly there is a perception of the other. And to insist on an objective, totalizing a reality of what the other is, perhaps doesn't make much sense. But the exchange did happen, and it happened in more ways than just the physical effect that we see here on the crest. It was, it sort of started a process of, for me, not only thinking about plants, but also feeling. And I mean, I laugh the scientific indoctrination actually taught me or trained me to limit my observational capacities to what can be objectively quantified and seen. Of course, the intuition as a scientist is always there, right? But somehow it doesn't matter as much, or it doesn't matter at all if the intuition has no objective proof. So yes, I went on to do several more experiments with the different encounters between plants and animals. Here, for example, we had human cancer cells and Nanochloropsis algae that were also meeting in the chamber in the laboratory. And also, I did this project, which I initially showed on this slide. It's to make plant. It was about making plant-human monsters, or the project is called PHYTOPIA, which meant I was conceiving plant embryos in an artificial womb that was filled with my own hormones, so human hormones. So much like plants produce molecules that affect our health, our mind, you know, like our bodies. This is a molecular communication channel that is open, and it's very, very much used in medicine still, both traditional and modern medicine. Plants are able to shape and organize our internal ecologies. But vice versa also happens. So it is a fact that plants produce molecules that are like our hormones. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and they can sense them. So in this project in phytopathology, I isolated my own steroid hormones from my urine. And then the plant babies of Arabidopsis thaliana, or tail cress, developed in artificial wombs or incubators that contained the steroid hormones, and the bodies of these plants were informed and shaped by these molecules. So this is sort of a reopening or a specific type of opening of a communication channel that is present everywhere all the time, but perhaps it becomes more real when we put things in glass jars and work sterile conditions and in laboratories. Or does it? So this is sort of, it was, I wanted to emphasize that within the first projects, I still very comfortable remained in the ways of knowing science. But then during this time, I also met a lot of people that some were scientists as well, but they had such a richer relation with plants. So one of them is Natasha Myers, and she's actually an anthropologist and a scientist who is also a healer, and basically a lot of her life has been devoted to understanding plants. And this is a photo from a project she did with her photographer colleague. And it is a photo of a tree where the photographer does not try to capture the tree as objectively as possible, but capture also the movement when the photographer relates to the tree. So Natasha writes that becoming censor invites you to explore how now indigenous people can become allies to indigenous resurgence by experimenting with ways to detune the settler common sense that informs conventional ideas about the living world. So to do this, you need to forget your best training, forget what you thought nature was, forget how you thought life worked, and forget, too, naturalizing tropes that make you believe that living beings work like machines, or that forests perform ecosystem services, or that reproduction and fitness were the only valuable and affordable measures of a life. Becoming censor aims to make strange the ways that the conventional ecological sciences have not only been deployed to colonize lands, but also to colonize our imaginations, how they evacuate all other ways of knowing the living world, most especially those local and indigenous knowledges that are tuned to the sentience of lands and bodies. Becoming censor invites you to sensitize yourself to the power moves of a settler colonialism that has rendered more than human sentiences so illegible and so impossible to perceive. So this project and Natasha Myers has been such an inspiration to me because I met her precisely at the time when I have had not only experience with working in science, but also through these projects of confronting digital otherness that so relied on the scientific imagination to construct encounters with plants, that I felt the limitation of relying solely on this as a way to have access to the plants. And yet I wasn't quite sure on how to escape this. And here was Natasha Myers, who is also a scientist and knows very well what I am talking about or how I'm thinking. And she reached out and said, well, everything you think you know could also be put in question. And so Phytocracy, and now we're going back to Phytocracy, was actually emerged from questioning of how else we could know plants. You know? Not just how else we know them, but how the way we know about something and the ways, the tools that we use to try to know is defining the limits of our cosmologies and also the limits of the ways we relate to others. Phytocracy is ultimately about how plants govern their environment, but not trying to objectively define or capture this. Rather, it's about how the way, what of plants we perceive, we use to make frames. Okay. Let me try to explain this again. Phytocracy is about us seeing the plants and how the different ways we see the plants will ultimately, for us, define how we possibly can relate to them. So whatever the plants are doing, they're offering us numerous entry points into their realms. And for me, in this project and in general, it's important to shamelessly recombine all possible cultural practices to break free from any single form that imposes itself on us and defines how we should see plants. So how to do this? The first thing that is important is to realize that the different ways of knowing are much less, I would say, inherently confined to their definitions that they might appear. For example, science through the centuries has changed quite dramatically. A 19th century naturalist would probably find modern science very strange. So in the early days of science, I guess a sort of embodied experience of the natural world was what they were doing.
Live streaming is on.
Whereas nowadays, this absolutely does not belong in a scientific article. The interest in plants themselves has also changed in the 19th century. Up to then, plants were quite interesting for early systematicians that were able to describe them and classify them and make their own world order. But then, as with the advent of this so-called biology, everybody was much more interested in the principle of how things worked, the hidden principles and the insides, and then plants somehow fell out of favor. So, on the other hand, recently, and we have quite renewed interest in plants in some areas of, or I would say almost like strange areas of science, like plant neurobiology or plant ethology, so that is concerned with plant behavior. And one of the leading researchers in this area is Monica Galliano, and you can see her picture here. She's an evolutionary ecologist, and I think through it's sort of this view on plants where she's not so much concerned about where plants have a brain, but understands that if plants need and want to survive and have survived in this environment, in a changing environment for so long, they must basically have all the capacities that other organisms have, like animals. So they must be able to sense, adapt, and learn, right? So instead of starting from the premise that plants are not intelligent because they have no neurons, they have no brain, she says, well, how can plants adapt to new circumstances? She then does these really funny experiments where she basically teaches a pea plant to react to a fan, much like the experiment with Pavlov and his dog, where his dog would start salivating, and Pavlov rang the bell. You know, it's like a famous ecological experiment on associative learning, where food is associated with a bell, and so when the dog hears the bell, it starts salivating because it's already anticipating food. And in a similar way, Monica made this experiment where she taught bees to anticipate that if they have winds, if the wind is coming from a certain direction, the light will come from the same direction or the opposite one. So basically, dry maize, it had to decide whether to grow left or right. And after training, the bee would be able to go in the direction of the wind, anticipating that food that is light will come from that direction as well. So it kind of, she was able to teach the bee to solve a maze through associative learning. And the reason why this is not only super lucid from the perspective of plant capacity, that is also really fascinating, is that the science has, aside from science, a completely different, I would say, spiritual relationship to plants. So she talks in this book, thus spoke to plant. She also talks about her visiting South America, going into this ritual. I forgot the plant that was transacted. I don't think it was ayahuasca, but some other plant. And in her this psychonautic journey, the plant spoke to her, and they said, well, you know, the experiments you're doing with sunflowers, trying to teach them how to do this maze, to associate wind and lights, you know, this Pavlovian experiment, used peas. You know, she had been trying to perform this experiment using the wrong plants. And in this psychonautic journey, she had sort of like a vision that told her to use the different type of plants, and that actually ended up confirming her hypothesis. So even like the ways of knowing of science can and are augmented by other experiences we have with people. So this I find interesting. And also in my research of how people in general have related to plants and not in general, but specifically different ways of relating to plants, I also encountered like really interesting cultural differences. And even within, let's say, the European context, if I asked you which of these landscapes looks more, in a way, they are similar. There's trees. The light it's slightly different, but ultimately the upper landscape, the one that is brighter green, is one that has been cultured by humans. This is a meadow from Slovenia. Slovenia is covered with forests. But the principle of nature conservation comes from the sense that the traditional way of living with nature is what is valuable. So by protecting traditional ways of life, you're also protecting nature. So nature on which humans have lived, and the existence of this meadow, so the grass you see in the forefront, is because humans have been cutting this down and using it as a pasture. And a lot of biodiversity actually comes from humans working on the land. Whereas the bottom picture represents a little snapshot of forests in Russia, where there has been no human intervention whatsoever. So that those forests go through these cycles in their own speed, and also this non-interventionist principle can sometimes have transient devastating effects. For example, when I think in Yellowstone National Park in the US, they opted for this kind of non-interventionist way of dealing with a fire that practically burned down a huge amount of forest. That was, in a way, it was heartbreaking, and it took, 30 years for the environment to recover. Now, there are two different principles of how actually, even if you want to appreciate and conserve nature, you can go about doing this. And it really is about both decisions are made culturally. So what I'm trying to get at here is that regardless of what you would like to think that leaving nature or appreciating nature is on its own, you are approaching it culturally. Let me go back to Natasha Myers. You saw this photo. You remember the photo of the tree. So this is a tree from the oak savanna in North America. What oak savannas are like, very particular, very special, pristine type of environment that actually existed only because indigenous people had a particular cycle of burning down the forests in a controlled manner. So when the settlers, the Europeans, came and started protecting the environment by preventing indigenous practices, these oak savannas started disappearing and are under threat. So it's not only leaving things as they are that automatically ensures what you might value as being natural. It's always about making a choice. Even if you choose not to intervene, you are kind of in relation to the environment. Okay, I'll slowly wrap this up by, maybe just telling you about this really special encounter that I've had with a lady, tree healer, which you can see here, actually participating in the performance that I made for PHYTOPIA. She's the one on the left. So it was really funny meeting her, because she said, "You see this tree? Yeah, I'm very sad. It's dying." And I couldn't quite understand how she knew. And she said, "Yeah, I know it looks fine right now, but in fact, you see how its roots are growing into each other. They're strangling themselves. So when they start doing this, they also grow a lot of offspring, usually at the roots, because the tree, this is the tree's way of already saying goodbye. So when she sees trees, she's able to enter their own lifespan, their lifespan. So she's able to see 100 years into the future by observing their state now. And I thought that was just fantastic. How she calls herself a tree healer, but she was actually trained as a gardener. So it's not necessarily that this practice of hers was initially spiritual, or initially comes from understanding the energies and flow and so on and so forth, but really from a material practice, she's able to read the signs of these trees and interact with them in a very specific manner. So on the right side of the image, you sort of see this birch tree that has its roots stayed. This is something she said is a good way to do it. It's a way of respecting the trees, because she said trees like their feet clean. And when you remove this debris around the tree, which supposedly the tree likes, you can also sort of see how its roots are doing. And you can tell a lot about how the tree is feeling according to the way that its roots are look or are poking out. So this way of observing the plants and combining the different types of knowledges might be a way to move up beyond the way we normally interact with them. So for me, the quest was quite straightforward, not so straightforward. But after taking in all these different ways, possibly related to plants, I said every true manifest mindset, philosophy, cultural cosmology. And so let's disrupt the existing ways by making new tools that actually recombine everything we know to try to find something new. So I said, for investigating hypocrisy, you need to be a body. You need to collect one basket of references, either absolved and kept in mind or sought out actively. So the references are there to situate ourselves in an already existing cultural context, whatever that might be. Enter the place in the flesh and with the flesh. spend time, spend attention, and during the week, the full moon conceive one tool every 2 days, which means that the making of the tools is somewhat of a practice and training to keep your mind and senses moving. And so what emerged were 10 different tools, which kind of carry a lot of cultural burden, and trying to explore the different ways in which we could alternatively relate to plants. And then this was carried out also as a performance, a fabulative expedition, inviting other people to try to use the tools of an archetype. So each of these tools was created based on a fictional character, and then the people were asked to use these tools. So the many layers of meaning created an opportunity for the people to experience plants differently. So I would say, even though the tools themselves had a lot of potent stories, ultimately, what I appreciated most was the opportunity to grab, to abduct people and allow them to pay attention to plants. So I will stop sharing the screen. Sorry. Okay. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay. So that ends this presentation, and if you would like, this is a good opportunity to show the movie. It's also like a moment to perhaps relax, because it's not much happens in the movie, and yeah, maybe if you play it now.
Yeah, I can show the video now about the, yeah, wait.
And I will use this opportunity to go to the toilet.
Okay, you go you go first. I show let me do可是我要等一下，我要这个。先取消。可是我想要用影片。有谁很会用吗？等一下，我现在只能用旁边。等一下啊，因为它现在只出现一个小小的画面。要用这个好了。
跟你想分享。
对，我想说，就是我们在播的时候也分享给他看。虽然是他的影片啦，但是他知道我们的。
看到那个分享画面，可以点一下他的。
哦，那还是我要先播。
但他现在看不到。
对。
点一下。
OK， 然后我再按。
然后它就出现。
OK，
然后现在应该是。
好，那我们就看一下这个影片。就是这影片就是主要跟这次的那个国防概念比较相关。他刚刚其实有讲了一些那个里面道具啊，但是他其实没有讲太多。觉得如果大家有兴趣的话，可以等他再请他多讲一点那些工具。没什么声音啊。好， We just finished the video. And now you can see like right now we're at C Lab, and we have two groups of people, which is led by Keting Chen. The other one is led by Dong Dong. But Dong Dong, he's not here. He's in Hualien. And so both groups, they will going to have their trips tomorrow, start from tomorrow. And 你们有任何人想要问一些什么？I don't know. They don't want to ask questions now. And I wonder if you have any like suggestion or I don't know any tips or idea for the trips. Ooh.
Well, I guess I sort of would not like to be. I mean, I can't say anything more than I've already said. I'm really curious and how the things will proceed, because I'm sure that it's going to be super interesting and very, very different from my experiences so far. So if anything, I would really like to hear about what the plans are for tomorrow. At least maybe Keting, you could share a little bit about that.
Can you hear it, Keting? Hey, you wanna come over here?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, we'll have a 2-day trip on tomorrow, and the first day we will go to see the cotton wood that happened in the September, and we found a dead body, and to get the piece of the wood and bring back and guess that if the tree's body left any message for us. And the second day we'll go to the natural forest to see the lovely trees, and the all is about more than 100 to roughly 1,000 years old trees, and to see when to look at the happiness trees, what they will look like and how they grow in a wild forest, and to combine these two trees, that we guess that how can we translate that message to let us know.
Nice.
But it's a hard walk. We will climb to the mountain to see the trees, and also the cotton tree is very, very heavy. It's a hard walk.
Nice. Well, take some photos of the roots for me, please. Like the trees, right?
Right. And we have 6 participants there. Can you see?
Oh, we should let her see the space. In library, but now we can't. Huh?
因为在这边连线。We can send you some photos that the space we arranged in the sea lab.
Nice.
另外一个
东东组有没有什么我也不知道哎？我说那2位今天的代表。Okay, these two. Can you wave your hands? They are the representatives of Dong Dong's group. Because actually there are total 5 persons, but now only 2. They are in Taipei because the others are not in Taipei. They are not physically showing up here. And I just want to ask them if they have any like anticipate or I don't know. I think we will only have the tree and then we see and see what we found out. Yes. And I think you already heard about the legend of Hege. You see the proposal.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, that's it's like a original legend that we don't really know. At least me, I don't know before. So I'm quite interesting as well to know what they can find out during the trip.
Okay. But is it true that this is a sort of like new legend?
Yeah, maybe it's the ancient one.
Okay, yes.
Sorry. 东东什么？好像我也不知道，但感觉应该是某一种比较原始一点的。然后他有一个作品，我们礼拜天会看到，那礼拜天才看得到。对，好，我无话可说了。Okay. Thank you for your presentation.
他在讲话，他讲话。
Hello. Yeah.
我们听不到声。
Well, we cannot see you.
We cannot hear
we not
you.
cannot hear you. The other. Yes.
Okay. Hello, and thank you for this presentation. I was just curious about two things. First, I don't know about this legend, and for you, Stella, amazing presentation. Thank you so much. And I was wondering, have you ever tried to live on a tree?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Have you ever tried to live inside a tree, on a tree house?
Yes. No, I haven't. The closest I came was actually camping in the forest, but not really. I think you're referring also to this activist that lived on the tree for like trying to save it for a couple of years, right? It's completely life-changing for her. No, I have not done that yet. Maybe in my future. Or really excited. Yeah. So I think the question was about the legend, right?
Sorry. No, you have a question.
If you could tell the legends that Dong Dong sent.
Which legend? Sorry, Hege?
The old new one.
The original one.
不知道。
最原始的故事。黑给最原始的故事。
对，它是一个证明他们那个部落的一个故事。
对，你要讲吗？
大家没有看过那个吗？他的文案吗？
有啊。
对啊。
不想翻译而已。
他们那个部落最古老的故事，然后它其实跟他们的主人有关系，所以其实应该要连线他吧？
对啊。
对啊，那我们怎么会知道？我们只是看了文案而已。
We only know a little bit because like the Dong Dong is not there, but like the story is about a farmer. It's not a farmer. It's a butcher or carpenter. I forgot someone who went into a forest and then he fell asleep and it's raining outside, big rain. So he went into a tree, like it's maybe a tree hole, and then he fell asleep. But when then he wake up again, he found out that there's a lot of men, but looks very beautiful. It looks like women, and they saw them like weaving or doing some handcraft. And they also, those men, they teach that that person how to do this works. And they also make love to men or many men. Okay, so and then that person fell asleep again. And then when he wake up, he found out that he's back in the reality. So maybe that's another space, or that's his dream. But then he know that a lot of traditions like weaving and handicrafts from Hagis. So those Hagis are like the ancestors of a tribe of aboriginals. And then they tell their people or their offsprings those kind of skills. Okay, well, we should let the artist tell you personally. Maybe he's online. I don't know. Maybe not. Okay, so. Do you have any questions you want to ask us, or do you have any questions you want to discuss? So should we just say goodbye now?
Yeah. So I wish you all a fantastic week of exploration. Really funny, dreamy experiences.
Okay.
And thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye. 烦了，干死。